In the heart of a small town forgotten by time, there was an old abandoned convent. The worn walls hid dark secrets and macabre stories that were whispered by the cold winds of the night. The convent, once a place of peace and prayer, had become the home of something evil. It was said that a nun, possessed by a demonic entity, wandered through the dark corridors, haunting those who dared to approach. This is the story of how two friends, John and Michael, got involved in a terrifying battle against the nun's curse. John and Michael were longtime friends, united by a friendship that began in childhood and grew stronger over the years. Both shared an intense and unwavering passion for the supernatural, devoting countless hours to discussing theories, urban legends, and mysterious accounts of unexplained events. The fascination they felt with the unknown drove them to constantly seek new adventures and challenges, always looking for the next great mystery to be solved. One morning, while John was drinking his coffee and absently leafing through the newspapers, he received an anonymous letter that immediately caught his attention. The letter, written in careful and somewhat ancient handwriting, invited John and Michael to explore the old convent on the outskirts of the city. The site, known for its dark history and full of frightening rumors, had been abandoned for decades and was often the subject of speculation and horror stories. The letter not only mentioned the existence of an evil presence that inhabited the convent, but also promised revelations that could change their lives forever. The words, shrouded in a deep mystery, aroused John and Michael's insatiable curiosity. The promise of discovering hidden secrets and facing the unknown was irresistible to them. Wasting no time, John called Michael, and they discussed the details of the letter with enthusiasm and a certain amount of nervousness. They decided they needed to investigate the location as quickly as possible. The excitement of a new adventure, combined with the possibility of discovering something extraordinary, was an opportunity they couldn't pass up. They prepared their equipment, which included flashlights, cameras, recorders, and other instruments that could be useful in their exploration. On the chosen night, when the full moon dimly illuminated the path, the two friends headed to the old convent. Every step they took increased the feeling of mystery, and adrenaline coursed through their veins. Upon arriving at the entrance to the convent, they felt an intense and inexplicable cold, as if an invisible presence was watching them. John and Michael exchanged a knowing look and, with renewed courage, opened the heavy wooden door that creaked with a disturbing sound. What they would find inside that abandoned place was a riddle they were eager to solve. So together, they stepped into the darkness, ready to face the unknown and discover the hidden truths that could change their lives forever. As they entered the convent at night, John and Michael felt a chilling cold that seemed to penetrate to their bones. The icy wind blew through the cracks in the broken windows, creating a whistling sound that echoed through the dark corridors. As they advanced down the main hallway, the atmosphere grew increasingly heavy and oppressive, as if the building itself was imbued with an evil energy. The two friends walked cautiously, trying to make as little noise as possible. Suddenly, they heard indistinct whispers that seemed to come from all directions, followed by macabre laughter that resonated off the stone walls. These disturbing sounds made their hearts beat faster, and fear began to set in, battling against the courage that had brought them there. With uncertain steps, John and Michael advanced down the hallway, their eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. Then, in the distance, they saw the figure of a nun standing at the end of the corridor. Her eyes were black as night, and her expression, though indistinct, exuded an aura of sadness and despair. The ghostly figure watched them for a few seconds that felt like an eternity before disappearing into the darkness, leaving a trail of fear and uncertainty. John and Michael exchanged glances, their faces reflecting a mix of terror and determination. They decided to follow the direction in which the nun had disappeared, though each step felt like a challenge to common sense. The previously silent corridor now seemed to murmur forgotten secrets and stories of horror. The narrow walls seemed to close in on them, increasing the sense of claustrophobia. Turning a corner, they found a room that seemed to have been used as a chapel. The high ceiling was covered in cobwebs, and the dusty pews were arranged in disarray. In the center of the room, a stained stone altar appeared to have been the scene of ancient and sinister rituals. An extinguished candle and an aged Bible lay on the altar, giving the place an air of abandonment and desolation. As they explored the chapel, John found an old diary partially hidden under one of the pews. Upon opening the diary, he discovered that it belonged to one of the nuns who had lived in the convent many years ago. The pages were filled with disturbing accounts of paranormal activities and occult rituals that had been secretly conducted in the convent. Reading the diary left John and Michael even more intrigued and apprehensive. They decided to continue their exploration, determined to uncover the truth behind the supernatural events that seemed to haunt the place. Each new corridor and room they explored revealed more evidence that the convent had been the scene of dark and inexplicable occurrences. Fear and curiosity mingled in their hearts, but their determination to understand the mystery of the convent was stronger. With each new discovery, they came closer to a truth that promised to be both revealing and terrifying. And so, together, they continued to brave the darkness, ready to face whatever lurked within the old convent. Determined to uncover the truth, the friends began an in-depth investigation into the history of the convent. Using local libraries, historical archives, and accounts from elderly residents, they embarked on a meticulous search for any information that could shed light on the dark mysteries surrounding the place. Each fragment of information led them deeper into a disturbing narrative filled with horror. After many hours of research and several sleepless nights, John and Michael finally uncovered the disturbing history of the convent. Centuries ago, a nun named Sister Agnes had become a central figure in a series of macabre events that forever marked the convent's reputation. According to records, Sister Agnes was a devout young woman who gradually drifted away from traditional religious practices, drawn to forbidden occult knowledge. Rumors quickly spread among the other nuns and the inhabitants of the nearby village. It was said that Sister Agnes practiced witchcraft and performed secret satanic rituals in the dead of night, when everyone else was asleep. Stories about her included accounts of strange chants, mysterious lights, and sinister apparitions. Her presence began to instill fear and distrust among the other nuns, who eventually reported her to the ecclesiastical authorities. The church, alarmed by the accusations, sent a group of clergy to investigate. When confronted, Sister Agnes was formally accused of heresy, witchcraft, and involvement with demonic forces. In a desperate attempt to save her soul and protect the convent, the clergy decided to perform an exorcism. However, the ritual, conducted with great intensity and fervor, ultimately failed terribly. During the exorcism, something went terribly wrong. Instead of expelling the demonic entity, the ritual seemed to strengthen the connection between the demon and Sister Agnes's body. Trapped in a state of eternal possession, the demonic entity maintained control over her, turning her into an instrument of terror and vengeance. Before succumbing completely to the evil power, Sister Agnes vowed revenge against anyone who dared to enter her domain, promising that no intruder would escape unpunished. The discovery of this macabre history filled John and Michael with palpable fear, but also with renewed determination. They realized that the figure of the nun they had seen was undoubtedly Sister Agnes, still trapped in limbo between the world of the living and the dead, her soul tormented by the entity that had failed to exorcise. They decided that they needed to find a way to free Sister Agnes's soul and put an end to the reign of terror that haunted the convent. They consulted ancient texts on demonology and exorcism, searching for any clues that could help them accomplish what the clergy of centuries past had failed to do. The task seemed monumental and dangerous, but John and Michael were determined to face whatever challenges arose. Each new lead and discovery brought them closer to the truth and the possibility of freeing Sister Agnes. However, they knew that time was crucial and that every moment spent in the convent increased the risk of becoming the next victims of the nuns' revenge. United by an unwavering friendship and fierce courage, they prepared for the final confrontation, ready to face the demonic entity and liberate Sister Agnes's tormented soul once and for all. While exploring the convent's dark corridors and abandoned rooms, John and Michael discovered a variety of ancient objects and disturbing writings that shed light on the place's dark past. Among the artifacts they found were worn crucifixes, broken rosaries, and dusty books containing notes in ancient, indecipherable handwriting. Each discovery added an additional layer of mystery and horror to the dark narrative they were unraveling. On a particularly ominous night, While exploring the convent further, John and Michael were startled by desperate screams echoing down the corridor. The high-pitched, distressing sounds seemed to come from a locked room, as if someone was trapped inside, crying out for help. Without hesitation, the two friends rushed towards the sound, their racing hearts pounding in their chests as they bravely faced the unknown. When they arrived at the room, they found the door closed with a rusty lock. With a combined force, they managed to force entry, revealing a scene that left them paralyzed with horror. Inside the dark, dusty room, they came across a series of old photos arranged on a wooden table, each one more disturbing than the last. In the faded photographs, the convent's inhabitants posed stiffly, their pale faces and empty eyes staring into the camera with an inexplicably sinister expression. However, what shocked John and Michael most was the discovery that everyone depicted had their eyes grotesquely gouged out, leaving only empty, bloody sockets. An icy chill ran down both of their spines as they took in the terrifying scene before them. What could have happened in that place to lead someone to commit such heinous acts? Before they could formulate a response, an acrid smell of sulfur began to fill the air, making the atmosphere even more oppressive and unbearable. It was then that the nun, with her sinister figure and her eyes as black as darkness itself, appeared before them once again. Without a word, she charged toward them with unearthly violence, her quick, uncoordinated movements emanating an aura of imminent danger. John and Michael barely had time to react before the nun attacked them with uncontrollable fury, throwing them against the walls with supernatural strength. The battle that followed was intense and desperate, with the two friends fighting for their own survival against a force that seemed beyond human comprehension. The nun moved with an agility and ferocity that defied rational explanation, her attacks being accompanied by cruel laughter and dark whispers that echoed through the empty corridors of the convent. Finally, after a harrowing and exhausting fight, John and Michael managed to land a decisive blow against the nun, making her momentarily retreat. With their last reserves of energy, they fled, running desperately through the dark corridors as the evil presence pursued them relentlessly. Even when they finally managed to escape the convent and retreat to the relative safety of the outside world, John and Michael knew that the battle against evil was far from over. The demonic nun was still on the loose, her thirst for revenge and destruction unquenched. But despite the dangers they faced and the horrors they witnessed, they remained determined to continue their search for the truth and to fight the dark forces that threatened to consume their lives and their souls. Amidst the terror that plagued the convent, John and Michael found a glimmer of hope in the form of a mysterious man named Father Thomas. This man, a former priest, had dedicated years of study to the occult secrets surrounding the ancient convent. A profound connoisseur of exorcism arts and the mysteries of the supernatural, he became an enigmatic figure wandering the outskirts of the convent in search of answers and redemption. Father Thomas, with his piercing gaze and calm voice, revealed to the two friends that he had encountered the possessed nun in times past and understood the intricacies of her malevolence. He offered to assist them in the task of banishing the demonic entity haunting the convent, promising to use his knowledge and experience to confront evil head-on and free the place from the darkness consuming it. However, to achieve this goal, Father Thomas knew they would need to gather strength and resources beyond the ordinary. He proposed to John and Michael a daring plan, involving the performance of ancient rituals and the search for sacred artifacts capable of channeling the divine light necessary to confront the possessed nun. It was a dangerous journey filled with uncertainties, but the three men were determined to face the challenge, whatever the cost. Together, they delved into the historical records of the convent, studying every detail of the ancient religious ceremonies and the events that led to the nun's downfall. They scoured ancient libraries for forgotten texts and consulted wise elders who held long-forgotten secrets. Each new discovery brought them closer to the knowledge needed to confront the evil awaiting them in the shadows of the convent. Meanwhile, terror continued to plague the convent, with reports of sinister apparitions and inexplicable incidents multiplying each day. The presence of the possessed nun grew stronger and more aggressive, casting a shadow of fear over all who approached the place. But John, Michael, and Father Thomas remained steadfast in their determination, preparing for the final confrontation that would decide the fate of the convent and their souls. With time running out and evil on the verge of reaching its peak, the three men finally gathered to perform the exorcism ritual that could seal the fate of the nun and the convent forever. Armed with faith, courage, and the sacred powers they had gathered throughout their journey, they entered the dark corridors of the convent, ready to face the evil that awaited them. The ensuing confrontation was an epic battle between light and darkness, with Father Thomas leading the ceremony while John and Michael protected the perimeter, facing the onslaught of the possessed nun and her demonic legions. The air was charged with supernatural energy, and the sounds of sacred chants mingled with the demonic roars echoing through the convent corridors. Finally, after a titanic struggle that seemed to last an eternity, the demonic entity was weakened and banished to the depths of the hell from whence it came. Peace returned to the convent, and the light of day dispelled the shadows that once enveloped it. John, Michael, and Father Thomas had triumphed over evil, proving that with courage, determination, and faith, even the darkest forces can be defeated. With the help of Father Thomas, the friends immersed themselves in an elaborate protective ritual, seeking to strengthen their spirits and prepare for the imminent confrontation with the possessed nun. Each step of the ritual was executed with precision, invoking ancient words of power and tracing sacred symbols in the dark corridors of the convent. Under the wise guidance of the former priest, they armed themselves with talismans and amulets, which, they hoped, would be their safeguard against the evil influences that permeated the place. However, even with their defenses up, the friends soon realized that the possessed nun would not be easily contained. She was a master of manipulation, casting terrifying illusions and distorting reality itself as she pleased. With every step they took towards the amulet that contained the essence of evil, they were faced with increasingly sinister challenges and deceptive traps that tested their courage and determination. The possessed nun played with their minds, exploring their deepest fears and sowing doubts in their hearts. One moment they found themselves lost in endless hallways, unable to find their way out, while the next they were confronted with haunting visions of loved ones transformed into grotesque caricatures of their former selves. It was a test of resistance and faith, with the possessed nun always one step ahead, manipulating the scenario of her confrontation with diabolical mastery. Despite overwhelming challenges, John, Michael, and Father Thomas persevered, their determination fueled by a burning desire to free the convent from the evil influence that corrupted it. They knew the amulet was the key to undoing the possessed nun's hold, and they were willing to face whatever horror was necessary to achieve it. United in their cause, they moved forward with renewed courage, each challenge only strengthening their resolve to triumph over the darkness. The journey to find the amulet took them to the darkest and most hidden corners of the convent, where ancient secrets lay hidden in the shadows. They faced deadly traps and intricate puzzles, each obstacle testing not only their physical abilities, but also their intelligence and acumen. But through teamwork and mutual trust, they overcame each challenge, moving ever closer to the artifact that would seal the possessed nun's fate and free the convent from her nefarious influence. As the nun intensified her attacks, the siege around John and Michael tightened. The evil that inhabited the convent was not content with just haunting the dark corridors. He sought to penetrate the minds of intruders, inflicting psychological torments that threatened to erode their sanity. John, in particular, was plagued by vivid nightmares and disturbing visions of his imminent death. Each night was a plunge into an abyss of terror, where the line between reality and illusion became increasingly blurred. Meanwhile, Michael fought against whispering voices that echoed in his mind, trying to drag him into the abyss of madness. The ominous words whispered in the silence of the night hinted at promises of eternal torment and utter despair, testing her inner strength and her resolve to resist the call of darkness. With each whisper, paranoia settled deeper into his mind, eroding his confidence and undermining his faith in reality itself. This growing psychological storm put the long-standing friendship between John and Michael to the test. Once inseparable adventure companions, they now found themselves immersed in a whirlwind of fear and distrust. The possessed nun's attacks were not only physical but also emotional, undermining the bonds that united them and turning their friendship into a battlefield where distrust flourished. Every look exchanged between them was filled with doubt and apprehension. Every word spoken carried the weight of fear and uncertainty. The shadow of distrust hung over them, dimming the light of camaraderie that once guided them. What was once an unbreakable bond now seemed fragile and susceptible to the relentless pressures of the evil that surrounded them. However, even amidst the darkness that enveloped them, sparks of hope still shone. No matter how much the possessed nun tried to sow discord between them, John and Michael refused to give in to despair. They knew that the true strength of friendship lay not only in moments of joy and happiness, but also in the ability to face the darkest and scariest challenges together. So even when their minds were plagued by nightmares and their souls were corroded by paranoia, they clung to the hope that, together, they could overcome any obstacle. For ultimately, it was the union of their wills and the strength of their bond that would keep them firm against the stormy tides of evil that surrounded them. Discovering the location where the amulet was hidden, John, Michael, and Father Thomas prepared for the final battle against the possessed nun. The atmosphere around the location was imbued with a sinister aura, while the corridors of the convent echoed with palpable tension, anticipating the imminent confrontation. Every step towards the battleground felt like a march towards the heart of the darkness that had consumed the convent for so long. Upon arriving at the site, they were greeted by the imposing presence of the possessed nun, whose black eyes gleamed with demonic malice. The air crackled with static electricity as the entity prepared to defend the amulet, which was its source of power and anchor in this world. Father Thomas, with his unwavering serenity, led the charge, determined to confront evil head-on and protect his companions at any cost. The ensuing battle was epic, with flashes of light and shadows writhing in a chaotic dance of supernatural powers. The possessed nun launched furious attacks against the intruders, each blow laden with centuries of pent-up torment and rage. John and Michael fought with all their might, using every bit of skill and courage they possessed to withstand the attacks of the demonic entity. At the height of the battle, Father Thomas recognized that a sacrifice was necessary to weaken the entity enough for John and Michael to destroy the amulet that kept it bound to this world. With silent determination, he threw himself at the possessed nun, absorbing her attacks with unmatched bravery. His body radiated with holy light as he fought to keep the entity occupied long enough for his companions to complete their mission. While Father Thomas faced off against the possessed nun, John and Michael advanced towards the amulet, overcoming deadly obstacles and deceptive traps that guarded their path. Each step was a race against time as the battle unfolded around them, and the energy emanating from the amulet pulsed with increasing intensity. Finally, with a combined effort and a final act of courage, John and Michael reached the amulet and destroyed it, severing the ties that kept the possessed nun bound to this world. With an anguished cry, the entity vanished in an explosion of light and shadows, its malevolent presence dissipating into the air like black smoke. As they watched the amulet disintegrate in their hands, John and Michael felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Father Thomas's sacrifice would not be forgotten, and his courage would be remembered forever as an example of the power of faith and human determination. As the convent filled with light for the first time in centuries, the two friends knew that, although the battle against evil may have ended at that moment, their journey was far from over. With the amulet in hand, John and Michael prepared to destroy it, but the nun made one last desperate attempt to stop them. They faced their greatest fears, each shadow seeming like an imminent threat, each noise echoing like an ominous warning. The presence of the evil entity hovered over them like a dark cloud, pressing their minds with doubts and fears. As they tried to focus on the task at hand, their minds were invaded by terrifying visions, distorted memories, and terrifying illusions created by the nun to sap their courage. John relived the traumas of his past, each painful memory dragging him deeper into his tormented mind. Michael was haunted by whispering voices that echoed in his ears, sowing doubts and sowing discord in his mind. For a moment, it seemed as if the entity's power was insurmountable, that its strength would be crushed under the crushing weight of fear and uncertainty. But deep in their hearts, John and Michael found a flame of courage and determination that refused to go out. With a supreme effort, they gathered their strength and faced the nun and her demonic antics head-on. Every step toward the amulet was a battle against terror itself. Every move a challenge to overcome the limits of his own courage. The amulet's pulsing energy seemed to withstand each blow, its presence exuding a malevolence that threatened to consume them. But with each blow, John and Michael felt determination grow within them, fueled by the conviction that they were fighting for something bigger than themselves. Finally, with one last blow, the amulet shattered into pieces, its evil influence dissipating like smoke in the wind. A tense silence fell over the convent as the nun, deprived of her source of power, retreated in defeat. John and Michael looked around, taking deep breaths of the fresh air of victory mixed with the acrid smell of the just-ended battle. With the nun defeated and the amulet destroyed, the convent was finally free of the shadow that had haunted it for so long. As they watched the light of dawn banish the last shadows of night, John and Michael knew their journey was not yet over. The battle against evil was a constant struggle, and they were ready to face whatever challenge the future held. With the amulet destroyed, the nun is finally banished from the convent, and the town slowly returns to normal. The once heavy and oppressive air gradually dissipates, and the residents of Ravenwood begin to feel a long-lost lightness. The sun seems to shine more brightly, and the atmosphere of fear that had hung over the town begins to vanish. John and Michael, marked by the terrible experience they endured, leave the site visibly relieved to have survived the encounter with the supernatural. Their pale faces and deep eye circles are silent testimonies to the horror they experienced, but also to the courage they showed. They walked together through the streets of Ravenwood, still trying to assimilate everything that happened. The promise to never again get involved with the supernatural is made with an almost desperate firmness. For them, the nightmare is finally over, and the prospect of returning to a normal life is a balm for their weary souls. However, evil is cunning and sometimes hides in the deepest shadows, patiently waiting for its next opportunity to emerge. Days go by, and John and Michael try to resume their routines, returning to work and daily activities. Yet, there is a subtle unease that never leaves them, a dark premonition that haunts their thoughts. As they attempt to re-establish a sense of normalcy, something sinister begins to manifest around the outskirts of Ravenwood. Animals mysteriously disappear. Inexplicable whispers echo in the dark nights, and an icy chill once again takes hold of the houses. Small signs suggest that perhaps the battle against evil is not entirely over. John starts having recurring nightmares, vivid dreams where he finds himself back in the convent, facing the demonic nun. Michael, in turn, feels a constant presence around him, as if he is being watched. These events make them question whether they are truly free from the grips of the supernatural, or if something even more sinister is yet to come. To be continued in the next episode. Don't miss it. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to receive notifications. Stay tuned for the next video, The Death Postman,